In the spring of 1997, the fast attack submarine USS Renfield, SSN 742, was 41 days into a routine North Atlantic deployment when something occurred that has no complete official account. I want to be precise about what I mean by that. I don't mean the account is classified. I don't mean it was redacted or sealed or placed behind some level of security clearance. I mean it does not exist. No report was filed. No entry was made. No incident was documented, because the men who experienced it collectively, independently, without discussion or coordination, decided not to create a record. What remains is partial. A sonar logbook with entries that flatline for 6 consecutive days, 6 days of no contacts written in different hands by different operators on different watches, in a stretch of the North Atlantic that is never acoustically silent. A post-deployment psychological evaluation that flagged 11 crew members for acute environmental stress response. A designation that 3 former Navy psychologists I consulted could not find in any standard diagnostic manual. A set of transfer orders, issued within 72 hours of the boat's return to port, that scattered the entire sonar division across 4 separate shore installations on opposite sides of the country. And there are the men themselves. 3 of them spoke to me over a period of several years. Independently. Without knowledge of each other's participation. Their accounts are not identical. They diverge on details, on timeline, on interpretation. But they converge on the essential fact. Something was detected. Something was not recorded. And the decision not to record it was experienced not as a failure of duty, but as an act of self-preservation so fundamental it preceded conscious thought. I need to establish what normal looks like before I describe what deviated from it. The USS Renfield was a Los Angeles-class nuclear fast attack submarine, commissioned in 1988. 110 meters of HY-80 steel, displacing approximately 6,900 tons submerged. Reactor compartment amidships. Sonar suite forward. Torpedo room in the bow. Crew complement of roughly 130 officers and enlisted men living in a space that afforded each person approximately 15 square feet of personal area. Most of it their rack, a coffin-sized bunk stacked 3 high in compartments that never fully darkened and never fully silenced. Life aboard was governed by the watch rotation. In 1997, most submarine crews operated on an 18-hour cycle. 6 hours on watch, 12 hours off. The off hours were divided between maintenance, qualification study, meals, and sleep, though sleep aboard a submarine is a relative term. The boat is never quiet. Ventilation fans produce a constant white noise. The reactor coolant pumps emit a low rhythmic hum that you stop hearing after a few days. It becomes part of you, like a heartbeat you no longer notice. Hull popping, the sound of the pressure hull adjusting to depth changes, occurs irregularly, a deep metallic groan that new sailors flinch at and veterans ignore. The atmosphere is recycled. Oxygen is generated by electrolysis, splitting seawater into hydrogen and oxygen. Carbon dioxide is removed by chemical scrubbers, monoethanolamine systems that cycle the air through absorbent solutions. The result is air that sustains life but never feels quite right. A faint chemical undertone that sits at the back of the throat, a quality of staleness that accumulates over weeks. CO2 levels are monitored continuously. If they rise above acceptable parameters, cognitive function degrades, slowed reaction time, impaired judgment, headaches. The crew doesn't always know when the levels are slightly elevated. They just feel slower, heavier, less precise. I mention this because the atmosphere itself becomes a variable. When I describe what the crew experienced, there is always the question, was it the air? Was it fatigue? Was it the slow, insidious cognitive erosion that comes from breathing recycled atmosphere in a metal tube 400 feet below the surface for weeks at a time? I don't know. Neither do they. The Renfield's commanding officer was Commander David Tiernan, 18 years of service, 3 previous submarine tours, a reputation for quiet competence that bordered on detachment. His executive officer was Lieutenant Commander Paul Foss, newer to submarines, considered more approachable by the crew but known for a particular intensity when things deviated from procedure. The chief of the boat, the senior enlisted man, was Master Chief Sonar Technician Alan Corrigan, a 22-year veteran who had served on 5 boats and was, by all accounts, the most experienced sonar operator aboard. The deployment was designated a routine Northern Atlantic patrol, primarily anti-submarine warfare training exercises coordinated with NATO assets, interspersed with periods of independent operations. The Renfield departed Naval Submarine Base New London in early March. The first 30 days were unremarkable by every available metric. A former machinist's mate who served aboard during this period, I'll refer to him as Carey, described the early weeks in terms that would be familiar to anyone who has served on a submarine. You fall into it. The rhythm. You stop thinking about the surface. You stop thinking about daylight. The schedule becomes everything, when you eat, when you sleep, when you stand watch. It replaces the world. After 2 weeks, you can't remember what sunshine feels like and you don't care. It's almost meditative in a way. Everything is routine. Everything is known. Every sound the boat makes is cataloged in your head. You know what normal sounds like, so if anything changes, you notice. That's the thing about submarines. You're always listening even when you're not the one on the headset. The sonar suite aboard the Renfield was built around the AN/BQQ-5 system, a multi-array passive listening system that represented the ears of the boat. The system comprised several components: the bow-mounted spherical array, a large dome of hydrophones in the nose of the submarine that provided broad-spectrum passive detection, the conformal array, hydrophones mounted along the hull, and the towed array, a long cable several hundred feet in length, streamed behind the submarine at depth, containing a line of hydrophones that could detect extremely low-frequency sounds at ranges exceeding 100 nautical miles. The sonar operators, sonar technicians designated STS, were the most intensively trained enlisted personnel aboard. Their job was to listen, to differentiate between the acoustic signatures of everything the ocean produced, the cavitation noise of distant surface shipping, the broadband rush of biological activity, the clicks and groans of marine mammals, the low-frequency rumble of geological events, the tonals of machinery aboard other submarines. Every contact detected was classified into categories: merchant shipping, military surface, military subsurface, biological, geological, environmental, or unknown. The critical point, unknown, was a temporary classification. It was not a resting state. An unknown contact required investigation, further monitoring, reporting up the chain of command, and resolution into one of the known categories. A sonar operator was never supposed to leave a contact as unknown indefinitely. The system demanded classification. The institution demanded answers. Every contact, regardless of classification, was entered in the sonar log, a handwritten record maintained at the sonar station, reviewed by the sonar supervisor at each watch turnover, and archived as part of the boat's official operational record. Gaps in the log were investigated. Unexplained omissions were disciplinary matters. This is the procedure that was violated. Not once, not by one person, but consistently by every sonar operator aboard for 6 consecutive days. The second crew member I spoke with, I'll call him Peterson, was a sonar technician second class. He was one of the 11 flagged in the post-deployment evaluation. He was reassigned to a shore facility in Dam Neck, Virginia, within 3 days of the boat's return to port. He served out the remainder of his enlistment there without returning to sea duty. Peterson was methodical in his account. He spoke like a man who had rehearsed his own memories many times, not to embellish them but to contain them, to maintain their edges. He was careful about what he said and equally careful about what he would not say. I'll tell you what happened in terms of procedure. What was detected, how it was handled, what decisions were made. I won't describe the sound itself. That's a line I won't cross. I've thought about it a lot, whether that's rational, whether it's superstition, whether I'm being ridiculous. And I've concluded that I don't care whether it's rational. I'm not going to describe it. You can know that something was heard. You can know what we did about it. But I won't give you a description. I accepted this. It would become a recurring boundary in all three conversations. Day 33. The Renfield was at patrol depth, between 400 and 600 feet, though Peterson would not confirm the exact figure, in the northeastern Atlantic, conducting independent operations. The boat was in a quiet posture, minimal machinery noise, reduced speed, towed array deployed. This was standard for the patrol phase. Listen, detect, classify. The ocean was the mission. Peterson was on the evening watch, 1800 to midnight, manning the narrowband sonar display. Narrowband analysis is the process of examining the frequency spectrum of incoming sound for discrete tonal lines, the specific frequencies produced by machinery, propellers, or other man-made sources. It is painstaking cerebral work. The operator stares at a waterfall display, a cascade of frequency data scrolling vertically, looking for faint horizontal lines that persist over time. I picked up a tonal on the towed array, bearing approximately 170 relative. Very low frequency, below 50 Hz. It presented as a single line on the narrowband display. No harmonics. No Doppler shift. Duration of initial detection was 6 seconds. He logged it. Classification, unknown, possible biologics. He noted the bearing, frequency, and time. He informed the sonar supervisor, a first-class petty officer on watch with him, who acknowledged the entry and moved on. The contact did not repeat during the remainder of the watch. At that point there was nothing unusual about any of this. We detect unclassified tonals regularly. The ocean produces sounds we can't always identify. You log it, you move on. The only thing that registered with me, barely at the time, was that the frequency was unusually stable. Biologics tend to modulate. Even geological sources have some variation. This was constant, like a test tone from a signal generator. But I didn't think about that until later. Day 34. The tonal appeared again on Peterson's watch. Same bearing, 170. Same frequency band. Duration, 9 seconds. I logged it again. Same classification. I mentioned to Chief Corrigan at turnover that I'd gotten the same contact 2 nights running, same bearing. He looked at the log, nodded, said he'd keep an ear on it during the morning watch. He didn't seem concerned. Low-frequency tonals in that band, it could be a lot of things. Hydrothermal activity. A distant industrial source on the surface. Seismic precursor. There's a whole catalog of things it could have been. Day 35. Duration, 22 seconds. Same bearing. Same frequency. I noticed now that the bearing hadn't changed despite our movement. We'd made a course change earlier that day, come around to the northeast. If this was a fixed source, something on the ocean floor, say, the bearing should have shifted as we moved. It didn't. 170. Consistent. Which meant either it was at extreme range, far enough away that our course change didn't significantly alter the bearing, or it was moving with us. He logged it. He brought this observation to Chief Corrigan. Corrigan listened, examined the previous entries, and said he would monitor it personally during the next morning watch. Corrigan was on the morning watch, midnight to 0600. I came in at 1800 the next evening and checked the log. He'd made no entry about the contact. I asked him at turnover if he'd heard it. He said no. Just no. Flat. No elaboration. Corrigan was the kind of guy who would normally talk your ear off about acoustic phenomena. He loved the science of it. He'd give you a 15-minute lecture on whale migration patterns if you asked a simple question. So when he just said no and walked out, I noticed. Day 36. This was the night the duration extended significantly. I came on watch at 1800. Normal turnover. The sonar supervisor, a second class named Garza, was my section partner. Good operator. Steady. We settled into the watch. Routine for the first 2 hours. Normal ocean noise. Distant merchant traffic to the north. Biological transients, clicking, the usual. And then at approximately 2047 local, the tonal appeared on the towed array. Same bearing. Same frequency. Same characteristics. Duration. 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Garza looked at me. I looked at him. We both watched the display. The line on the narrowband waterfall was perfect. Absolutely straight. No wobble. No fade. No frequency drift. For 2 minutes and 40 seconds, it just existed. And then it stopped. Cling. Like a switch. Peterson made the log entry. He classified it unknown, under investigation. He flagged it for the chief. That night after watch I couldn't sleep. My rack was in the forward berthing compartment, just aft of the sonar room, separated by one bulkhead. I lay there in the dark and I could hear the ventilation, the normal background of the boat. But I was listening past it. Listening for something. I didn't know what. I didn't sleep for maybe 3 hours. When I finally did, He stopped. I don't discuss that part either. I asked, the dreams? I said I don't discuss it. Carey, the machinist's mate in engineering, was unaware of the sonar contacts at this point. His observations were purely behavioral and they began around this time. It was small things. The sonar guys changed. Harmon, STS-3 Harmon, was a loud guy. Always cracking jokes at meals, always talking about whatever movie he'd watched on the mess TV. Around day 35-36 he went quiet. Sat down, ate, left. Didn't talk. Didn't engage. I asked if he was okay and he said, yeah, just tired. Tired is constant on a boat. Everyone's always tired. So I didn't press it. But it wasn't just Harmon. Over the next couple of days I noticed it with all the sonar techs. Shorter sentences. Less eye contact. They started sitting together at meals, which they always did, but they stopped talking to each other too. They'd sit in a group and nobody would say anything. Just eating in silence. I remember thinking it looked like guys coming back from a funeral. Not sad exactly. Just heavy. Preoccupied. He noticed other changes. Sleep patterns disrupted throughout the forward compartments. Men in their racks at unusual hours, or conspicuously absent from racks when they should have been sleeping. The boat has a sound when everyone's racked out. Between watch rotations when most of the crew is asleep, it gets settled. The noise level drops. People breathe differently. And that quality, that settledness, stopped happening. I'd be on the mid-watch in the engine room and I'd go forward to hit the head and there'd be guys just awake. Sitting in the crew's mess. Not doing anything. Not watching a movie, not playing cards. Just sitting. 2-3 in the morning. Staring at nothing. I asked if this was exclusively sonar personnel. No. That's the thing. It started with the sonar guys, but by, I don't know, day 38? It was spreading. Fire control technicians. A couple of the torpedo men. The navigation ET. People who had nothing to do with sonar, who had no reason to know what was happening in sonar. But they were behaving the same way. Quiet. Withdrawn. Disrupted sleep. The third crew member, I'll call him Daly, was a navigation electronics technician. His workspace was in the navigation center, adjacent to the sonar room. He maintained the boat's inertial navigation system, the SINS ship's inertial navigation system, and the associated electronic charting equipment. His account provides a parallel track of anomaly that he did not, at the time, connect to what was occurring in Sonar. Day 37 or 38. I was doing my routine INS calibration check. We'd come to periscope depth the previous night for a comms window. That's when the boat comes shallow enough to raise a mast and receive the VLF broadcast from shore. During that window we also get a GPS fix to update the inertial nav standard procedure. So I'm checking the fix against the INS position, and there's a discrepancy. The INS was showing the boat's position as approximately 4 nautical miles from the GPS-derived position. Direction of error, southeast. 4 miles after a 48-hour dead reckoning period isn't catastrophic, but it's outside normal parameters for the system. I'd recalibrated after the previous fix. The gyros were reporting nominal. There was no obvious mechanical explanation. I logged the discrepancy, recalibrated, and reported it to the navigator. The navigator, a lieutenant, noted it and moved on. Routine drift. Recalibrate and continue. 2 days later, after the next comms window and GPS fix, the same discrepancy appeared. 4 nautical miles. Southeast. Same magnitude, same direction. That's not drift. Drift is random. It's accumulated error from gyroscopic precession, from platform motion, from a dozen small factors that compound over time. It doesn't produce the same error in the same direction over and over. I told the navigator again. He was less receptive this time. Said I should just recalibrate and stop overthinking it. But I ran the numbers. I checked the Euro logs. Everything was nominal. The system was functioning correctly by every diagnostic measure. It just kept telling us we were 4 miles southeast of where we actually were. I asked him what bearing southeast translated to from their approximate position. He paused. He hadn't made this connection until I asked. Bearing approximately 170, he said. Maybe 175. Depending on exactly where we were. Let me pause here and acknowledge what I'm constructing. 3 independent accounts. A sonar contact on a consistent bearing of 170. A navigation error consistently displacing the boat's indicated position toward bearing 170 to 175. The connection was never made aboard the boat. Daly was not privy to the sonar data, and the sonar operators were not aware of the navigation anomaly. The correlation was only apparent to me years later, when I had all 3 accounts in front of me simultaneously. It may be coincidence. Bearing 170 in the North Atlantic from most positions points generally toward the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, a massive geological feature that produces its own acoustic signature and could, theoretically, influence both sonar detection and, through some mechanism I cannot specify, inertial navigation. I consulted a geophysicist about this. He said the idea of a geological feature influencing an inertial navigation system was not consistent with any known mechanism, but added, carefully, that deep ocean geomagnetic anomalies are not fully mapped and their effects on sensitive equipment are not entirely characterized. Draw from that what you will. I don't know what to draw from it myself. Day 37. The night the refusal began. Peterson. The contact appeared at 2112. Same bearing. Same frequency. This time the duration was different. It didn't stop. I asked him what he meant. It didn't stop. It came in at 2112 and it was still there at midnight when the watch turned over. 3 hours and 48 minutes of continuous emission. Same frequency. Same bearing. No modulation. No variation. Just there. On the display. A perfect line. Ian Garza watched it for the entire watch. Neither spoke about it during the 3 hours and 48 minutes it was present. They sat in the blue-lit darkness of the sonar room, headphones on, and watched the line on the waterfall display. At some point, maybe an hour in, I realized I had my hand on the logbook, but I hadn't written anything. The pen was in my hand. The book was open. But I hadn't made an entry. And I looked at Garza, and his log sheet was blank too. We made eye contact, and I don't know how to describe it. We both knew. We knew we weren't going to write it down. It wasn't a decision. It was already decided. Somewhere below the level where decisions happen. It was just known between us. I asked about the sonar supervisor, who should have been in the room, who should have been reviewing the display, who should have noticed a 3-hour and 48-minute tonal contact on the towed array. He was there. He was sitting at his station. He was looking at the same display we were looking at. He didn't say anything either. 3 men. On watch. Watching an unidentified acoustic contact persist for nearly 4 hours. None of them spoke. None of them logged it. None of them reported it. The watch ended at midnight. The next section came in. We did turn over. I said, "No contacts," and the oncoming operator looked at the display, and the contact was still there. He could see it. I could see him looking at it. And he said, "Okay," and sat down, and we left. I asked if the contact was present for the next watch as well. I don't know. I went to my rack. I didn't check the log the next morning. I didn't ask. I didn't want to know if they'd logged it or not. And when I came on watch the next evening, the log showed no contacts for the preceding 18 hours, and the display was clear. Whether it had stopped or whether they just looked past it, I don't know. There is something I need to address here, because it's the question that anyone with military experience would immediately ask. Where was the chain of command? The commanding officer, Commander Tiernan, was not in sonar. On a submarine, the CO is not routinely present in the sonar room during watch operations. He is briefed at set intervals, usually at the end of each watch, by the officer of the deck, who receives reports from all watch stations. If a significant contact is detected, the OOD is informed, who informs the CO. But if the sonar operators reported no contacts, then the OOD had nothing to relay. And if the OOD had nothing to relay, the CO had no reason to investigate. The system depends on reporting. If the reporting stops, the chain of command is blind. Peterson addressed this directly. People ask me how the CO didn't know. How could this happen on his boat without his knowledge? And the answer is, the system is built on trust. On the assumption that the people at the bottom are reporting truthfully. If they don't, everything above them operates on false information. Tiernan trusted his sonar team. He trusted Corrigan. He had no reason not to. But Carey, who observed from outside sonar, believed Tiernan knew more than he acknowledged. Tiernan was a smart man. Quiet, observant. He walked the boat every day, made rounds through every compartment. He saw what I saw. He saw the sonar guys going silent. He saw the crew's mood shifting. He never said anything, at least not publicly. But I think he knew something was wrong. Whether he knew what was wrong, whether anyone told him directly, I can't say. But he knew something. And then there was the detail about the XO. Carey, unprompted, described an incident from approximately day 39. I was coming forward through the middle-level passageway. It was late, maybe 0200. I was heading to the head. And I came around the corner by the sonar room, and Foss was standing outside the door. The XO. Just standing there. His hand was on the door handle. He wasn't opening it. He wasn't entering. He was just standing there, facing the door, hand on the handle. Like he was trying to decide something. I asked what happened. He heard me. Turned around. His face was, I don't know how to describe it. He looked like a man who'd been caught doing something wrong. But also relieved. Relieved that he'd been interrupted. He said, "Carry on," and walked aft. I stood there for a second and listened. I could hear the sonar room through the door. The normal hum of the equipment. And underneath it, very faintly, something that... He stopped. I'm not going to describe it. I heard something. Briefly. Through a closed door. It could have been anything. Equipment noise, environmental, anything. I went to the head and went back to my rack. I asked if he slept. No. Not that night. The sleeplessness is a detail that all three mentioned, and it extended well beyond the sonar division by day 38 or 39. Peterson, I was averaging maybe 2 hours a night by that point. Not because of noise. Not because of anxiety exactly. It was more like vigilance. Like my body wouldn't let me go fully unconscious. Like some part of me needed to remain awake and listening. I'd lie in my rack and I'd be aware of every sound the boat made. The ventilation cycling. The hull adjusting. The coolant pumps. All the normal sounds. And I'd be listening through them. Listening for something beneath them. I never heard it outside of sonar. But I couldn't stop listening for it. Daily, I started having trouble with the transition between wakefulness and sleep. That borderline state, hypnagogia I think it's called. I'd be drifting off and I'd jolt awake with the absolute conviction that something had just happened. Something important. Something I needed to write down. And I'd reach for my notebook and the feeling would vanish. And I'd be left with nothing. Just the impulse to document with nothing to document. Night after night. Carrie, the engineering guys started making mistakes. Small ones. Valve alignments slightly off. Log readings transposed. Procedure steps skipped and then backtracked. Nothing dangerous. The watch teams caught everything before it mattered. But the error rate went up. Noticeably. The engineering officer mentioned it at quarters one morning, said we needed to be more careful, that he was seeing too many discrepancies in the watch standing records. But he said it almost apologetically. Like he knew we were all exhausted and he didn't entirely understand why. Day 39. The navigation discrepancy measured by daily increased. 6 miles. Southeast. Same direction. But now 6 instead of 4. I recalibrated and it came back even faster. Within 24 hours it had accumulated again. 6 miles. The system was functioning correctly by every measurable parameter. The gyros were stable. The accelerometers were reading within specifications. There was nothing wrong with the machine. But the machine was wrong. He reported it again. This time the navigator was more concerned. They ran a full diagnostic on the INS, took it offline, reinitialized, verified all reference inputs. Everything checked out. They brought it back online and within 12 hours the drift had returned. 6 miles southeast. The navigator went to the CO. I know this because I was called to the NAV center to brief Tiernan on the discrepancy. He listened. He asked questions, good ones. Technical questions. He understood the system. When I told him there was no mechanical explanation for a directional drift of this magnitude and consistency, he got quiet. He stared at the chart for a long time. Then he said, "What's at that bearing?" And I said, "Sir, there's nothing. Open ocean. 3,000 fathoms of water." And he nodded and said, "Increase the GPS fixed frequency. Come to periscope depth every 12 hours instead of 24. Keep the INS calibrated." And that was it. I asked Daly if Tiernan seemed surprised. No. He seemed like a man who was receiving confirmation of something he already suspected. He wasn't surprised. He was resigned. Day 40. The day Carrie heard the sound. He was in the engine room, the aft section of the boat, separated from the forward compartments by the reactor compartment, which is an unmanned, heavily shielded space that no one enters during operation. He was wearing sound-powered phones, an analog, unpowered communication system used as a backup and for specific watch stations. I was doing rounds on the port turbine generator. Normal. Checking oil levels, bearing temperatures, the usual. And I heard something in the headphones. Not a voice. Not a normal sound. Sound-powered phones sometimes get crosstalk, bleed over from other circuits if the junction boxes are old or the wiring's degraded. You'll hear faint voices from the con, or machinery noise from forward. It's common. This wasn't that. He would not describe the sound. It lasted maybe 10-12 seconds. And then it stopped. I took the phones off and looked across the engine room at the throttle man, MM2 Vasquez. He was looking back at me. He'd heard it too. On his phones. Same time. Neither reported it. I want to explain something. In the engine room you report everything. A temperature reading that's 1 degree off normal, you report it. A vibration that sounds slightly different, you report it. That's the culture. That's how people stay alive back there. You never let something go unreported because you think it's probably nothing. Because if it's not nothing and you didn't report it, people die. His voice was tight. And we didn't report it. Both of us. We just didn't. Vasquez went back to his station. I went back to my rounds. We never spoke about it. Not then, not ever. I saw him once years later at a Fleet Week event. We recognized each other. We said hello. We talked about nothing for 5 minutes, and neither of us mentioned it. Not one word. I asked him why. Because talking about it is the same as writing it down. It makes it real in a way that, I don't know. In a way it shouldn't be made real. I don't have the vocabulary for what I mean. It's like, you know how there are sounds that exist only as long as no one names them? That probably doesn't make sense. It makes more sense than he thinks. Day 40. I need to describe what was happening to the boat's routine by this point, because the effect was not limited to individual psychology. The institutional rhythms of the submarine, the watch rotations, the meal schedules, the maintenance routines, were beginning to degrade. Carry, meals were shorter. People ate fast and left. The cooks noticed. I heard one of them complaining that he was throwing away more food than usual because people weren't coming to meals at all. The laundry schedule fell behind. Maintenance logs were getting completed, but the entries were terse. Normally you write a brief description of what you did, any discrepancies noted, that kind of thing. By day 40, guys were writing one-word entries. Satisfactory. Normal. Checked. No detail. No elaboration. Like they didn't want to spend any more time with pen in hand than absolutely necessary. This detail struck me. The aversion to writing, to documentation, extending beyond the sonar log into routine maintenance records, into the daily administrative fabric of the boat. Peterson confirmed this from his own experience. I noticed I was holding my pen differently. Sounds absurd. But I was gripping it harder than normal. Like I had to force my hand to make the marks. Even my own initials on the watch station log, just my initials, 2 letters, felt like effort. Not physical effort. Psychological effort. Like each mark on paper was a commitment I was reluctant to make. Day 41. The final day of the anomaly period. Peterson's account of this day is the most detailed and the most restrained. He spoke about it slowly with long pauses. I came on watch at 1800. The contact was not present. The display was clean. Normal ocean noise, shipping to the north, biologics, the usual. I sat there for the first hour, 2 hours, waiting. Not hoping it would appear, not hoping it wouldn't. Just waiting. It was the first time in days I felt like I could breathe normally. Like the air in the sonar room was different somehow. Lighter. He monitored through his entire watch. No contact. The bearing 170 remained empty. At watch turnover I looked at the log from the morning and afternoon watches. No contacts. But this time it felt like it might be true. Like the no contacts was accurate, not a lie. Like the ocean had gone back to being just the ocean. Daly confirmed the navigation anomaly resolved on approximately the same day. His next INS check showed the system holding calibration within normal parameters. No directional drift. No phantom displacement. Carey noticed the atmosphere begin to lift. It wasn't immediate. It wasn't like someone flipped a switch and everyone was fine. It was gradual. Over 2 or 3 days, guys started talking at meals again. Started sleeping. Started making normal log entries with normal detail. The card games came back. People laughed. It was like recovering from an illness that nobody acknowledged having. The boat continued its patrol for 12 more days. Day 41 to day 53. Nothing unusual occurred. The sonar log shows normal entries: contacts detected, classified, resolved. Shipping tracked. Biologics noted. The ocean doing what the ocean does. Peterson, those last 12 days felt like a different deployment. Like the first 33 days and those last 12 days were one patrol, and the week in between was something else entirely. Something that happened in a different space. I can't explain it better than that. The Renfield returned to Naval Submarine Base New London on day 53. Standard approach, standard mooring, standard Liberty call. The families were on the pier. The crew went ashore. To every outward appearance, it was an unremarkable homecoming from an unremarkable patrol. Within 72 hours the following occurred. The entire sonar division, 8 enlisted men including Peterson, Garza, Harmon, and Chief Corrigan, received transfer orders to shore installations. None were assigned to the same facility. Virginia, Washington State, California, Florida. The orders cited needs of the Navy, the universal catch-all that requires no further explanation. 11 crew members, the 8 sonar technicians plus 3 others whose identities Peterson would not confirm, were scheduled for post-deployment psychological evaluations. Not the routine post-deployment screening that all crews undergo, but individual sessions with a provider who was not part of the boat's regular medical support. Peterson described his evaluation. It was on base. A small office. The man was in civilian clothes, slacks, button-down shirt. He introduced himself by first name only. No rank, no title. He had a notepad but I never saw him write anything while I was speaking. The questions. He asked about my sleep during the last 3 weeks of deployment. He asked if I had experienced any perceptual anomalies. That was his exact phrase. He asked if I had discussed anything unusual with anyone outside the crew. He asked if I had kept any personal records, a journal or diary, during the deployment. He asked if I had written any letters home that referenced unusual events. I noted the consistent focus on documentation, on records, on whether anything had been put into writing. I told him I hadn't discussed anything with anyone and I hadn't written anything down, both of which were true. He seemed satisfied. He thanked me. He said I might experience residual adjustment, his words, and that if I did, I should contact a number he gave me. I never did. I asked what residual adjustment meant. He didn't specify, and I didn't ask. I wanted to be out of that room. I asked Peterson about the transfer orders, whether they felt punitive. No, they felt like quarantine. Not punishment, containment. They didn't want us together. They didn't want us in proximity to each other or in proximity to the boat. It wasn't about discipline. It was about separation. About making sure that whatever we'd shared couldn't be maintained, reinforced, transmitted. He paused. That's the word that came to me at the time. Transmitted. Like it was something that could spread. And maybe they were right. Maybe keeping us together would have been, I don't know. I don't know what it would have been. Carey was not transferred. He was not flagged. He remained aboard the Renfield for the next deployment cycle, serving under a completely new sonar division. The new guys were fine. Normal. Good operators. The boat felt normal again. But I'd walk past the sonar room and I'd think about it. Not the sound, I barely heard anything just that one time through the phones. But I'd think about the silence. The way the boat went quiet. The way everyone stopped documenting. The way it spread. That's what scared me more than anything, not the thing itself, whatever it was, but how fast and how completely the crew responded to it. Without orders. Without discussion. Like we all knew the same thing at the same time and none of us had to be told. He served 2 more years aboard the Renfield before separating from the Navy. During that time he said nothing occurred that resembled the incident. But I'll tell you something I never stopped doing. Every time I stood watch in the engine room, I'd check the sound-powered phones before putting them on. I'd pick them up and listen for a second before settling them on my head. Just a quick check. Just to make sure the line was clean. I did that for 2 years. Every watch. I still don't know what I was listening for. Daly's post-deployment experience was different. He was not transferred. He was not flagged, which surprised him when he learned much later that others had been. I was just a NAV tech. I reported a system discrepancy. That's all I did, my job. I don't think anyone connected my INS issue to what was happening in Sonar. I didn't connect it myself until you told me about the bearing correlation. At the time it was just a maintenance problem. An unexplained one, but just a maintenance problem. But he experienced the same residual phenomenon that the others described. The reluctance to write. For about a month after we got back, I couldn't maintain my personal journal. I'd been keeping one for years. Daily entries, nothing special, just notes about my day. And after that deployment, I'd sit down with it and I couldn't make myself write. The pen would be in my hand and I'd just stare at the blank page. It wasn't that I had nothing to say. It was that the act of writing felt exposed. Like I was being observed. Like putting words on paper was an open channel. A broadcast. Something could receive it. He resumed journaling eventually. About 5 weeks after the return. One day it just lifted. Like fog burning off. I sat down and wrote a normal entry and it felt normal. And I thought, okay. Whatever that was, it's done. And it was. I never experienced anything like it again. I attempted to verify elements of these accounts through official channels and public records. The USS Renfield, SSN 742, does not appear in any publicly available registry of Los Angeles-class submarines. The Los Angeles class comprises 62 boats, hull numbers SSN 688 through SSN 773. I was unable to confirm or deny the existence of a boat with the specific hull number given. Whether this represents an alteration made by my sources, an alteration made by me for their protection, or an actual gap in the public record, I will not clarify. Commander David Tiernan's service record could not be located through standard public databases. Lieutenant Commander Foss could not be located. Master Chief Corrigan could not be located. I contacted the Naval History and Heritage Command regarding sonar logs from 1997 North Atlantic patrols. I was told that such records, if they existed, would be subject to standard retention schedules and might have been destroyed. Alternatively, they might be held in archives that are not accessible to the public. The representative I spoke with was polite, unhelpful, and entirely uninterested in my inquiry. I consulted 3 former submarine officers, all retired, all with multiple deployments, about the plausibility of a 6-day gap in sonar logging going undetected by the chain of command. 2 said it was essentially impossible under normal circumstances. The third said, on a submarine, anything is possible if enough people decide together that something didn't happen. The boat is its own world. What happens inside it stays inside it unless someone chooses to bring it out. I spoke with Peterson one final time. It was approximately 2 years after our initial conversation. He had left the Navy. He was working in telecommunications infrastructure, installing and maintaining fiber optic systems. He lived in a landlocked state. He seemed settled. Calm. Different from the careful, guarded man I'd first spoken with. I asked if his thinking about the incident had evolved. Evolved? I don't know if that's the word. I stopped trying to explain it. For a long time I needed an explanation. I needed it to be fatigue or CO2, or some weird acoustic phenomenon that we just weren't equipped to classify. I needed it to be something with a name. Something I could put in a box and close the lid on. He paused. I don't need that anymore. I've accepted that I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was inside the boat or outside the boat. I don't know if it was a thing or an event or I don't even know what categories to apply. And I've accepted that the not knowing is permanent. I'm never going to know. Nobody is. Because the one thing that might have told us, The record, the documentation, doesn't exist. We made sure of that. I asked the question I'd been holding back. Did he regret not logging it? The silence was long. No. And I want to be clear about how unusual that is for me. I was a good sailor. I followed procedure. I believed in the system. The logging requirements, the chain of command, the documentation. I believed in all of it. I understood why it existed. And I violated it. Deliberately, repeatedly for 6 days. And I have never once, in all the years since, felt that I made the wrong choice. He shifted in his chair. I could hear it through the phone. I think, and this is the closest I'll come to an explanation, so listen carefully, I think there are things that exist in a particular way only as long as they remain unrecorded. Things that become something else, something more, when they're given a fixed form. When they're documented, written down, made part of the record. I think what we encountered was something that was looking for that, looking to be recorded, looking to be named. And I know, that we were right not to give it what it wanted. I asked him how he could know that. The same way I know not to touch a live wire. The same way I know not to step in front of a train. It's not intellectual knowledge. It's survival knowledge. It's the kind of knowing that exists in the body, not the mind. Every man in that sonar room knew it. Every man on that boat knew it, whether they understood why or not. We knew because something very old in us, older than training, older than procedure, older than language, recognized what was happening and responded correctly. He was quiet for a moment. I think we were the last line of defense. Not the hull. Not the reactor. Not the weapons systems. Our refusal. Our silence. That was what kept it on the other side of whatever boundary it was testing. And I think if even one of us had broken, if even one operator had written a detailed entry, described what we were hearing, given it a classification and a file number and made it official, I think something would have changed. Irreversibly. I asked, changed how? I don't know. And I don't want to know. And neither do you. There is one final detail. I include it because all three men mentioned it and because the convergence makes omission feel dishonest. In the weeks following their return from that deployment, each of them experienced the same phenomenon. Not a sound. Not a nightmare. Something related to the act of writing. Carrie, for about 3 weeks, every time I picked up a pen, signing a form, filling out a log, anything, I had the sensation of being watched. Not observed by a person. Watched by something that was paying attention to what I was committing to paper. Like writing was no longer a private act. Like it had become a form of communication with something that was reading over my shoulder. It faded. But it was vivid while it lasted. Daily, I couldn't journal for a month. I'd open the book and my hand would refuse to move. Not a physical paralysis, more like an overwhelming reluctance. Like my body understood something my mind didn't. Like writing in that book would be opening a door I'd already closed. Peterson, I switched to block printing for a while. Couldn't write in my normal handwriting. It felt too personal. Too identifiable. Like my cursive was a signature that something could use. Could read. Could know me through. I went back to normal eventually. But there was a period where even writing my own name felt like I was giving something away that I couldn't get back. I don't have a conclusion. I have 3 accounts from 3 men who don't know each other spoke to me. I have a sonar log with 6 days of silence in an ocean that never goes silent. I have a navigation system that pointed consistently towards something that wasn't there, or shouldn't have been there. I have 11 men scattered to the winds after a deployment that produced no official incident. I have a commanding officer who retired quietly and an executive officer who left the Navy for a landlocked state. I have a boat that was decommissioned and scrapped without anyone retrieving whatever its automated systems may have captured during those 6 days. The machine may have recorded what the men refused to. If it did, that record is scattered across a naval shipyard in pieces too small and too numerous to ever reassemble. And the men who were there maintain all these years later, that this is how it should be. That the record should not exist. that the silence was not a failure, that the gap is not an absence but a boundary, a line held, a door kept closed. They are certain of this. They cannot tell you why in words that would satisfy you, but they are certain. I have one more thing. It isn't from Peterson or Carey or Daly. It's from a fourth person, someone I spoke with only once, briefly, who would not allow me to record the conversation or take notes, who contacted me after learning, through channels I still don't understand, that I was asking about the Renfield. This person identified themselves only as having been involved in the administrative response to the deployment. They would not specify their role, their rank, or their branch of service. The conversation lasted approximately 4 minutes. They said, "You should know that what happened aboard that boat was not unique. It was not the first time and it was not the last. There are other boats, other crews, other logs with gaps. The ocean is very large and very old and there are things in it that have always been there. Before submarines. Before sonar. Before human beings put to sea in ships. We are visitors in an environment we do not fully understand, using instruments that detect far more than we are equipped to process. Sometimes the correct response to detection is non-acknowledgement. The Navy does not have a formal protocol for this because formal protocols require documentation. And documentation is precisely what must not occur. I asked them what happens if someone does document it. The line was quiet for several seconds. It's happened. The effects are difficult to describe and impossible to reverse. The personnel involved are cared for. But they are not the same afterward. Recording it completes a circuit that should remain open. It creates a fixed point that something that allows for. They stop themselves. I've said more than I intended. Please don't contact this number again. The line went dead. The number when I called back was disconnected. I don't know what to make of this. I don't know if the fourth contact was genuine, someone with real knowledge, or an elaborate response to my inquiries designed to mystify or misdirect. I don't know if the entire framework I've assembled here, 3 crew members, a fourth anonymous contact, navigational data, sonar gaps, constitutes evidence of something real, or a collective psychological event produced by confinement and fatigue and the deep ocean's capacity to unsettle the human mind. I don't know. But I know what Peterson said. And Carey. And Daly. I know they said the same things independently without coordination years apart. I know they all described the same reluctance. The same instinct. The same certainty that silence was the correct response. Not because it was easy but because it was necessary. Because the alternative was worse in a way that none of them could articulate but all of them felt with the force of absolute conviction. The sonar log for the USS Renfield, spring 1997, shows 6 days of nothing in a place where nothing is impossible. The men who created that nothing did so deliberately. They call it the right decision. They will not describe what they heard. They will not tell you why silence was necessary. They will only tell you that it was. And when you ask, when you press, when you say surely there must be more, surely you can tell me something, they respond with the same thing. Every one of them. The same phrase or something close to it. Some things exist only in the space between experience and record. That's where they belong. That's where they have to stay. And then they stop talking. And that is the end of the conversation. And you are left with the shape of something you will never fully see. The outline of an event that was deliberately not preserved. A boundary that was held by men whose entire training screamed at them to document, to report, to record. They refused. They have never once regretted it. And somewhere in the North Atlantic, below the thermocline, in water cold enough and deep enough that light has never reached it, whatever they heard that week in 1997 remains exactly as it was, unnamed, unrecorded, unacknowledged. Waiting, perhaps, for someone to finally write it down. The USS Renfield, SSN 742, cannot be confirmed in any publicly available naval registry. The personnel referenced in this account spoke under conditions of anonymity. No official record of the events described has been produced, located, or acknowledged by any branch of the United States military. The Sonar log, if it exists, has never been released. The 6 days remain empty. This account is, itself, incomplete, a description of a gap rather than a filling of one. The author acknowledges that this document may constitute exactly the kind of record the crew of the Renfield believed should not exist. Whether this matters, whether a second-hand account carries the same weight as a first-hand log entry, is a question the author cannot answer. The phone number given by the fourth contact has not reconnected. The author sleeps fine. Most nights.